I can't help but start the interview with Ironman, only because it's such a giant hit, $320 million box office, which I've always hated when people define movies by their box office, but here I am doing it, only because it's so gigantic. Did you sense ever that it would be this big, or?
No, we didn't, you know, to me 200 would have been ridiculous. You know, that would have been, if you would have come up to me, you were an options trader, and say, okay, I'll buy anything over 200, I would be like, I'll take it. Because I thought, you got to basically make back what you spend on the movie in the domestic box office, kind of a rule of thumb, maybe oversimplified. So as long as the thing made money, and it was, you know, it was well over $100 million, the budget was, it was over, it was about in the 150, 160 range. So that's the nail-bite number. And then the thing that really started to scare us is sort of a new phenomenon. All these tracking numbers come out. So you could make money on the movie, but disappoint based on what the expectations are, and still come out with people sort of paying their condolences to you,
right,
opening to $50 million.
Especially on a blockbuster, expected blockbuster type film. I'm going to divert now because you said options. So I knew you worked for a year on Wall Street. So I haven't talked to anybody in the entertainment business that referred to movies on the option market. So wasn't a good profession?
Wasn't a good fit for me. It wasn't. I wasn't on the trading floor. I was in facilities planning, which gave me a good overview of everything. And let me tell you, if you don't like what you're doing, that it feels like a you know, a prison sentence, because every day you're there, and if you don't love it, you can't be good at it.
So you go to Wall Street. You then tell your parents you haven't quite finished school.
I haven't finished school, and I don't like Wall Street now.
Did you know I'm going to go and do Ironman?
I didn't know that.
Years.
I knew that I was going to go back to school, and I made Dean's List like that, because you work for a year, and it just changes your DNA. And I was a straight A's, Dean's List, and then I went cross country on a motorcycle, which is something I sort of dreamed of doing while I was working.
With a bunch of buddies, or you just went off by yourself?
At first, I went with a bunch of bikers. Then I realized I wasn't really a biker.
Did you have all that black stuff? And
we had leather and rings, and it was.
Are your parents still thrilled with all this?
They're not too happy that I'm going cross country. And at this time, I was just my dad. My mother had passed away when I was 11, so it was really my dad and my grandfather. And I stopped in Chicago and I saw people doing improv. I saw, at the time, it was Chris Farley, Mike Myers, Tim Meadows, a lot of people who.
You didn't just walk in by accident to this place.
I walked in because my friend from high school and college had been taking classes at Second City, and I just watched. I said, "This is fantastic. This is improv. It's everything I like. You be funny. You're on stage, and you don't have to memorize any lines. And it's,
that's good.
It's not like musical theater. It felt very spontaneous. And then I saw the wall where all the people from Saturday Night Live that I looked up to that graduated from that place.
Right.
And I called my dad. I said, Dad, I think I want to move here and do this. And I was 22, and he said, you're young enough that if you're wrong, you could still do something else. And you're old enough that, you're making a mature decision. And I was Dean's List, so I was leaving school at the top.
Right.
And he was very supportive. And from that point on, it was a matter of getting in the union, doing commercials, and eventually getting cast in the movie Rudy, which was a huge, huge break for me.
Look, besides being an honor student at Notre Dame and TA and father, I'm also a tutor.
And you saw what a cultural phenomenon one movie can create.
Over time. But that does not necessarily correlate with how big of a hit it is in the moment. Right. How many movies do we celebrate in the moment as big hits? By all the metrics that we have of what it scores in the box office, how it tracks, how much money it makes, whose job it saves. But it's very different from the phenomenon of how things bear out in our culture and what kind of ripple we make.
That is true, except if you're a studio executive like I was forever, and Monday morning comes, and if somebody said, it doesn't really matter.
I know.
This is going to work in 10 years on home video in, France. It doesn't
For you, it doesn't. No. For me, it does.
Right, of course.
It's a big deal. And I remember talking to Sean Astin because he was just in something called Where the Day Takes You, and it bombed. But it got great reviews, and he got great reviews. And we were talking in the makeup trailer, and I had never been in a movie before, and he'd grown up in the movies. And I said to him, are you telling me, I said, you got to be happy about this. He says, no, it's terrible. I said, you're telling me you would rather be in a movie that made money than one that got good reviews? And he was like, in a second. And it just blew my mind. I couldn't
I think 90% of people would think that. because
It keeps you going in your career.
the fact that Iron Man was so giant is better for your career than if it had been as good as it was and failed.
That's true.
Better to make money than not.
But I think it's better to make less money and be in better movies consistently
Oh, absolutely.
than to
Absolutely.
make money consistently, because when you have your failure, it's like Zathura. Zathura was a bomb at the box office.
This is the second movie you directed.
Second, it was actually the third. I had done Maid, Elf, and then Zathura.
Oh, Zathura was after.
Zathura
Elf.
was after Elf. So I was coming off a hit. It seemed like a safe play. Sony was very excited. It was based on a Jumanji-type property. Very excited. Here's the secret script. Don't show it to anybody. I said, this is very commercial, plus I have a take on it. Perfect. Make money and something I could get excited about. Because as a director, as you
Right.
know, you're working 2 years on something, you better love it.
Right.
So I had my in. The movie bombed, but it was the best reviewed movie of Sony that whole year. That was able, the fact that it was a good movie was able to float my career through and allow me to get Iron Man, because they figured, okay, the movie was mishandled, it was a good movie, but it wasn't a hit. When you have hits that are bad, and then you have one that doesn't make
You're
money and is
totally
bad,
right.
you're done.
Well, I think your case is made by Swingers, which was extremely well written. You
Thank
wrote
you.
it and produced it. You did something that I've always respected, is you wouldn't sell it to
Right.
anybody that wouldn't have you act in it.
Right. And my friends, and Vince, by the way, that was his first big movie, Vince Vaughn.
Right.
So, but
So
I
the
appreciate
quality of that movie must have led the people who decided that you could do Elf to allow you to do
Yeah,
Elf.
it was a long road between those two, and I had done Maid in the middle. But Swingers is a great example. Everybody thinks of Swingers as a hit coming out of the '90s. The thing made less than $5 million.
When you go up to talk to her, man, I don't want you to be the guy in the PG-13 movie everyone's really hoping makes it happen. I want you to be like the guy in the rated R movie, you know? The guy you're not sure whether or not you like yet.
The movie didn't make money, but it seems to have had a cultural impact over the last decade in a way that other movies that were more successful commercially then didn't sustain.
Did you just go off and say, you know what, I know this environment, I know about young men looking for women in my age, I'm just going to go write this movie?
It was, quite the opposite. I was just like, I got a copy of Final Draft, which is a screenwriting program, and I was playing around with it, and all of a sudden you write for a few minutes, and then you got 4 pages once it's formatted, and it looked like a real script. And then I just, from my sketch writing background, from being in Chicago, writing was not a precious thing where you're tearing your hair out. It's like, oh, here's a funny sketch, and now I know the format of screenplays from reading all these scripts as an actor. And so I just banged it out and showed my friend at the time, Ron Livingston, and I showed Vince Vaughn, and they really were getting a kick out of it, but it was more like how you doodle in your notebook and show your friends your cartoons, as opposed to, I'm going to submit this body of work to a magazine and see if I can get published. It was purely a matter of making my friends laugh and enjoy it.
Iron Man is the opposite, because it's an effects movie. Everything has to be laid out, thought through,
Yes.
incredibly carefully, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Jon Favreau's summer blockbuster Iron Man, which made hundreds of millions of dollars and is out on DVD now, is really an excellent accomplishment.
What's going on here?
Let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing.
It was extremely well cast, it was well shot, the special effects were great. Maybe the best superhero movies ever made, and really solidified Jon Favreau's career. Are you going to do Iron Man 2?
Yeah. We're
great.
working on it already. It hasn't been announced because all the paperwork sort of hasn't all been worked through, but I've been working on it for a while, and we hired a writer, and I would be there today if I wasn't here.
Now, how about the difference between making an independent film and making a studio film? You've done both now. You've
Yeah, I've done both.
independent, and you've done the biggest studio movies you could do.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference, or each fine on its own?
I like the big ones because there's more freedom, and that sounds weird, but
Economic freedom or
Maybe I
creative
just, you know,
freedom?
both.
Really?
Yeah. When you have an independent film, that's not a lot of money compared to the other movies, but to the people who are giving you money, it's a lot of money. To those dentists, that's their whole life savings. So you got a lot of people really looking over your shoulder on the little ones. Now, when you have a movie like Iron Man, they say to themselves, even if we screw this thing up completely, we'll make $80 million. So let's keep the budget at a certain level. We'll open to 40 million. If you look at all the comps, it's like looking at selling a house. It's business. If you live in Santa Monica and you have this size lot and you have this kind of house, you're going to make this much money. It's clockwork. It's amazing to me how looking at tracking and those
I've
gene
done a
counters you
few
make fun of.
movies that are big movies that open to zero. No matter what the tracking says, no matter what the press says, or on television, you have this, you know.
Well, that's a whole other animal.
All of a sudden,
TV.
nobody
TV's
goes.
Crazy.
Nobody
TVs
goes.
are changing. Those are shifting sands. But with movies, if you're coming out on this many screens, granted there are exceptions to everything, but it's nothing like independent movies. You know, you're kind
Should
of
have come to see our arachnophobia. I can name 5 of them.
No room for amateurs in this game.
I think you have the luxury with Iron Man that it was at an era where these superheroes
Yep.
are, and everybody was waiting for the Marvel and the new one.
Yep.
But there are times, at least in my career, where you have a big movie and a big budget and you're betting the store.
Yes.
And the store doesn't open.
Yes.
And then you got to get over that
Yes.
as an executive and say, well, I've got a few more stores coming.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's
they
different
will.
for your gig. My gig's different.
Well, the other interesting
We're
thing
much
is
more
that
resilient.
well, I'm not sure about it. How so?
Because the failure of a film is not going to necessarily bury you, whereas you can lose your job. You can lose your job as an executive if you fail. I can't lose my job. I could go to director jail for a while. But if you're smart, you could sneak in.
Oh, look at these executives that fail pop up everywhere else. It really is similar.
But if you're talking about running a studio, there's only a couple jobs. There's only so many slots on the Sunday Funnies for cartoonists, and there's only so many slots at running a studio.
It's true.
It's a very competitive environment.
One of the
I wouldn't
reasons-
like the job. You get blamed for things you shouldn't be blamed for, and sometimes you get credit for things that you shouldn't get credit for.
It's fantastic. It's like being and I thought this from the day I started. It's like being a manager of a baseball team. It is okay to be fired. In other words, it's not a
part of the
shame.
gig.
It's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah.
So I was never fired. I was always waiting to be fired. But somehow, just when I thought I was going to get fired, and the press was saying I was going to get fired, we hit Grease, or we hit Saturday Night Fever, or we hit
Let me ask you one thing.
something.
Can I ask you one thing?
Yeah.
This is the thing that blows my mind. Now, I'm a dad. I got 3 kids. I'm a husband, I'm married, and I love my job, and I work really hard. The amount that I work, I am still intimidated when I see what a studio head's phone sheet looks like, their appointment book, breakfast, lunch, dinners. How do you fit your life in and make a family work?
It's just priorities. I never missed a kid's school event. I never missed a teacher conference. I never missed anything. And when I was working my way up and my boss said, you have to be somewhere, I'd say, no. And if anybody ever says to me, when I was running Disney, I'm really concerned, should I go to my kid's soccer game or should I come to the
Yeah.
meeting? It's the kid's soccer game.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, for the business,
Yeah.
a guy or a woman has chaos at home, it just seeps into the job.
It does. And that's why I only work in LA, by the way. I won't go out of
Well,
town.
with 3 small kids, you have
I
to.
can't
right.
do it. It's just not worth it because I've done enough in my life where I'm very satisfied with it. I love what I do, but if that broke apart, it just shows you how insignificant the other thing is once you learn the value of that.
Totally. I loved having you here.
Hey, great talking to you.
Interesting. It's fun to talk to
I
somebody
think you
who's-
might be better at this than your old job, and
Oh,
that's
no,
not
no.
that's not a backhanded compliment.
No,
I meant that in a nice
believe
way.
me, not at all. This is much harder than what I did before. Thank
Great.
you.